It begins in silence. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of a chamber breathing softly beneath the earth. Here, in the dim glow of forgotten time, a faint shimmer waits upon stone. It is neither parchment nor scroll, not ink nor pigment, but something older. A map etched into rock, worn smooth by centuries, yet still alive with whispers. An oil lamp flickers. The flame bends and sways as though it too is searching, casting shadows that glide across carved lines and symbols. Dust hangs in the air like ash from an invisible fire, drifting, settling, rising again. And as the flame quivers, the map reveals itself, not all at once, but in fragments, as though unwilling to surrender its secret too quickly. It is said that Alexander, the restless wanderer, once carried visions of lands beyond the horizon, lands that could not be bound by empire or crown. Perhaps this was his secret chart, not of kingdoms to conquer, but of constellations to follow. The map glimmers faintly in the half-light, a geography woven not of earth and soil, but of memory and dream. Each line bends like a river through shadow, and each symbol hums like a star suspended in darkness. Whispers tell us that these lines lead not toward power, but toward silence. Not toward conquest, but toward the sacred unknown. Step closer, and the air itself thickens. It feels as though the chamber breathes around you, exhaling centuries of dust, inhaling the hush of your footsteps. The stones beneath your hand are cool, yet tremble faintly as though remembering. You trace the etched path of a vanished river, a stream that once cut through fertile earth but now lies buried beneath dunes. Along its winding course, faint circles mark places that were once cities, cities of song and smoke, of marketplaces and prayers, now long dissolved into sand. Some believe these circles are not cities at all, but stars, constellations brought down to earth, placed here by hands who wish to turn the heavens into maps for wandering souls. The desert above this chamber, wide and endless, is a mirror of the sky. To walk its dunes by moonlight is to follow the very lines carved here in stone. Was this map a guide for armies, or was it a chart for pilgrims seeking something beyond victory? No voice can answer, and so we drift deeper into the silence. It is said that Alexander listened not only to generals, but to dreamers, prophets, and mystics who whispered in the quiet of night. Some carried scrolls of secret wisdom. Others carried nothing but riddles on their tongues. Perhaps it was one of these shadowed voices who pressed a finger against stone, who marked these lines, who left behind this silent atlas for no one, and for everyone. Imagine the emperor standing here, the lamp trembling in his hand. Around him his men restless, their armor gleaming faintly in the gloom. And yet he would not hear the clang of iron. He would hear instead the softer pulse of hidden rivers, the faint hum of eternity echoing in these walls. He would see an empire not as land divided and ruled, but as a constellation spread across time, stitched together by whispers and stars. Some say the map was never meant to lead outward, but inward. Each line a memory, each circle a vow, each symbol a threshold in the soul. The chamber grows warmer with the weight of breath, as though the walls themselves exhale stories. Myths rise like incense curling upward, blurring what is known with what is imagined. Some speak of brotherhoods sworn in shadow, bound not by war but by silence. Some tell of oaths written not in ink but in sand, scattered by the wind, remembered only by the stars. Others claim the map is a veil, a curtain drawn across something that cannot be fully revealed. To follow its paths is to step not into territory, but into uncertainty, to wander endlessly through chambers of reflection until one no longer knows whether they are awake or dreaming. And perhaps that was always the truth. For the empire Alexander sought was never of soil or stone. It was of memory, of breath, of something that dissolves the moment it is touched. In forgotten corners of the earth, travelers speak of finding fragments, a pillar etched with strange markings, a shard of stone with lines that resemble constellations. Some dismiss these as coincidence. Others whisper that they are pieces of the same great chart, scattered like seeds across deserts, mountains, and seas. To assemble them would be to awaken something long buried, a map that guides not the body but the soul. But the fragments remain scattered, and perhaps they were meant to. For what is whole must one day break, Yet what is broken can linger in silence, calling softly through time. The oil lamp sputters, its flame bending low, then rising again with a sigh. The map shimmers faintly, as if alive, as if listening. The longer you gaze, the less it resembles geography, and the more it resembles memory itself. Shapes blur into one another. River becomes star, star becomes path, path becomes silence. Perhaps it was never a map at all. Perhaps it was only a mirror, a way for those who looked upon it to glimpse their own hidden constellations. It is said that when the last torch is extinguished, when the chamber sinks into full darkness, the lines still glow faintly, not with fire, but with starlight, as though the walls themselves remember the heavens, as though the earth itself still breathes the dreams of those who once walked upon it. And so the journey ends not at the edge of a city, nor at the mouth of a river, but here, in the quiet chambers of thought, in the wandering silence of the listener's own heart. What is empire but dust? What is power but a shadow? And yet what is dream but starlight? Dust and starlight, both fleeting, both eternal, both dissolving the moment one tries to grasp them. This is what remains of maps and kings, of oaths and brotherhoods. This is what lingers when words fade, when fires die, when footsteps are swallowed by sand. Perhaps Alexander's empire was never truly lost because it was never meant to be found. It lived, and still lives, not in stone or soil, but in this silence. The oil lamp flickers once more, then dims. The chamber breathes its last warm sigh. Shadows fold back into stillness. The map fades, not vanishing, but waiting for another quiet soul, another restless wanderer, another dreamer to lean close and listen. And as the silence deepens, we are left with only the softest of echoes. An empire dissolving into stars, and stars dissolving into silence. It begins with a hush. Not the hush of sleep, nor of still air, but the hush of stone, ancient stone, breathing softly in moonlight. Somewhere in the folds of forgotten land, among dunes that ripple like a sea of silver, lies a place whispered of, but seldom named. The air here carries an echo, as though walls once stood and voices once spoke, though now only the wind drifts, and the moon keeps watch. It is said that Alexander, wanderer of horizons, dreamt of such a city, a place not carved for war or conquest, but for silence. A city suspended between earth and sky, belonging neither to armies nor to kings, but to the night itself. Some call it Alexandria of the Moon, though no maps bear its name. Others say it was not a city of stone, but a vision, a dream carried in the restless mind of the emperor, surfacing on nights when his sleep grew heavy with prophecy. Beneath the pale veil of moonlight, scattered ruins seem to breathe with a pulse unseen. Stones shimmer faintly, as if marked by celestial fire. Pillars half buried in sand lean toward one another, like guardians keeping vigil. A sense lingers that something waits here, just beyond reach, in the hush between waking and dream. Whispers tell us the city was conceived not by masons, but by mystics. Architects who studied the heavens more than they studied stone. They spoke of aligning temples not with the sun, but with the constellations of night. Of gates that did not open for armies, but for the breath of the stars. Imagine marble columns rising in quiet rhythm, each one mirroring the geometry of a constellation. Imagine broad courtyards, where water once shimmered in still pools, reflecting the full face of the moon as if the heavens themselves had bent down to gaze. Some believe the city was a living calendar, each plaza designed to measure the breath of time by shadow and starlight. Others believe it was a threshold, a place where heaven and earth touched briefly, like the brush of two hands that never fully clasp, and yet nothing remains but fragments. Stones crumbled into silence, sands shifting endlessly, and the pale voice of the moon. It is said that Alexander walked here only in dreams, that he would wake in his tent, the lamps extinguished, and whisper of moonlit gates that would not let him pass. His generals, practical men, dismissed such visions as the wandering fancies of fatigue. Yet he returned to them again and again, a city too close to forget, too distant to find. Some tales tell that he ordered expeditions, small bands of men sent out beneath moonlight, to search the horizons where dunes met sky. They wandered days, sometimes weeks, and returned with nothing but silence in their eyes. Still, the emperor would speak of it in hushed tones, as if the city were less a place than a promise. Perhaps it was never meant for him. Perhaps it waits not for conquerors but for dreamers. Beneath the silence of the night, the ruins still seem to listen. If you stand long enough, if you breathe deeply, some say you can hear faint voices stirring. The echo of architects long vanished, describing temples that faced not east or west, but upward. The murmur of priests who charted the spiral of the stars. The hush of pilgrims who came not seeking wealth, but stillness. One legend tells of a gate at the heart of the city, a gate not carved for human entry, but for the heavens themselves. Its arch was built to frame a single constellation, a star-marked path only visible on nights when the moon was full and high. To step through it was not to cross into another street, but to step into another way of seeing, another way of being. Perhaps the city itself was the map, and the moon its guide as the night deepens. The line between ruins and dream grows soft. Stones begin to shimmer, as if remembering their shapes. A column seems taller, a wall less broken. Pools of shadow gather into what might have been courtyards. It is as though the city returns for a moment beneath the moon, rising from dust in the silence of imagination. You can almost hear footsteps, almost hear the distant echo of a lyre carried through the air. But when you listen closer, there is only wind and the steady eternal breath of night. Was it ever real? Or is it real only now, in this moment of imagining? Perhaps it does not matter. In forgotten corners of the world, fragments have been found, stones marked with lunar symbols, shards carved with spirals that resemble constellations. Scholars argue whether they belong to this lost city or to another, buried in the same sands of history. But the silence between their words says more than their arguments. The truth slips away, as it always does, like moonlight across water. Some believe the city still waits, hidden not by distance but by time. That on certain nights, when the moon is high and the earth exhales deeply, its gates open once more, not to the eyes of armies, but to the quiet gaze of dreamers and wanderers. Others whisper that the city was never built in stone at all, but in memory, in the hushed chambers of the human soul, where visions linger like breath in the night. It is said that some places are too sacred to vanish. That even when their stones crumble, their essence lingers, suspended in the silence of the world. Perhaps this city is one of them. Not a ruin, but a threshold. Not forgotten, but veiled. And so we return to the ruins, to the stones that shimmer faintly beneath the moon. They wait, as they have always waited. Not with impatience, but with the quiet stillness of eternity. They do not speak, yet their silence hums softly, like the low pulse of the earth. The city remains both near and unreachable, both lost and alive. A half-remembered promise, a dream suspended in the hush of night. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was never built for kings. Perhaps it was built only for this moment, for the stillness of listening, for the hush that comes before sleep, for the dream that rises as the world falls silent. The city waits. And beneath the breath of the moon, so do we. It begins with a corridor, silent, breathless, endless. A passage of stone stretching into shadow where the air itself seems older than memory. You step softly, as if each footfall might awaken something that has waited too long. Along the walls, shelves rise. Shelves not of wood, but carved from the stone itself, as if the earth had once opened and offered its bones for the keeping of words. It is said that there was once a library, not of Alexandria but of Alexander, a chamber built not for the public record of empire but for private visions, for the maps that charted not only rivers and mountains but the pathways of the soul, for scrolls that recorded not the voices of scholars, but the dreams of an emperor who wandered too far into silence. Whispers tell us it was hidden away, veiled beneath desert stone, far from the dust and flame of cities. A library that could never burn, for its fire was not of parchment or ink. Its fire was silence. The story begins in shadows. Imagine oil lamps flickering along those shelves. Their flames bend low, their light trembling against papyrus curled like sleeping wings. Each scroll hums with a faint echo, as if the words within were not written with ink, but with breath, still warm, still alive. Some are marked with rivers no map has charted. Others show coastlines that vanish into mist, places where the land dissolves into the oceanic unknown. Still others speak of stars tied to destiny, constellations marked with spirals and lines, pointing not to conquest, but to a secret order of the heavens. Was this library real? Or is it only a memory that the centuries dreamed into being? Historians search, but silence remains. Dust covers the corridors. Shadows fall deeper. The papyrus whispers only when no one is listening. It is said that Alexander gathered not only cities but voices. He listened to priests of the Nile, to mystics of Babylon, to philosophers who wandered beneath the moon. And some of what he heard he carried here, into this chamber, not the words of victory, not the decrees of kings, but the fragile, veiled knowledge that drifts between dream and waking. One scroll, whispers claim, bore the name of a river, whose source was the breath of the earth itself. Another described a gate of stone that mirrored the constellations, aligned with stars long since forgotten. Others still carried maps that stretched not across continents but across time, maps of what was yet to come. To walk through this library is to step not through history, but through prophecy, and yet no flame ever touched it. No smoke, no ash, no ruin by fire. This was a library that burned without fire, for its flame was the silence of forgetting. It was not destroyed in a single night, but dissolved slowly, like mist before the morning sun. Scroll by scroll, shelf by shelf, memory faded. What remained was not knowledge, but the echo of knowledge. Not parchment, but dust. Perhaps that is the true fire, the fire of time, which burns more surely than flame, which leaves no smoke, no ruin, only silence. Some believe the library still breathes, hidden beneath stone, waiting for those who know how to listen. They say that if one stands in certain ruins at night, when the moon is high and the air is still, the earth hums faintly, like the soft turning of pages, that beneath one's feet lies a chamber where the scrolls still shimmer faintly, glowing with starlight instead of flame. Others believe it was never real, that the library existed only in dream, in Alexander's restless mind, in the space between candlelight and sleep. A place not of stone but of memory, a chamber built in silence, guarded not by walls but by time. And yet, listen closely and you may hear it. The shelves rise higher. The darkness deepens. In the silence, you begin to sense the shape of what was written. Words no longer legible but present, like the afterimage of light when your eyes close. There are diagrams of spirals, oceans marked not by waves, but by breath. Stars arranged in patterns that echo the rhythm of the human heart. It is said that the truest scrolls were not meant to be read at all, but dreamt. That their words were only keys, meant to unlock visions in those who slept near them. Perhaps Alexander himself lay in this chamber, his head upon stone, and dreamt not of battles, but of futures. Perhaps these dreams were his real empire. A kingdom of silence, spreading across centuries. Invisible but eternal, there is an image that lingers here, a lamp guttering low, its flame trembling as though it knows its time is near, a scroll unrolling itself not by hand, but by the weight of centuries, symbols glowing faintly, then fading, then glowing again, and then silence, deep and oceanic, filling the chamber until the lamp flickers out. The library does not vanish. It simply waits. In forgotten corners of the world, fragments have been found. A strip of papyrus bearing unknown rivers. A shard of stone carved with spirals that resemble constellations. A name whispered in languages no longer spoken. Scholars argue, but the truth is softer than their words. The truth drifts, veiled, carried by silence. It is said that the library was not meant for discovery, that its power lay in its secrecy. To find it would be to lose it. To search for it would be to miss it. For some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some knowledge is too sacred to remain in the light. Perhaps the library still burns, even now, not with fire but with silence, and so we walk once more through its corridors. Shadows fall across shelves that stretch into forever. Papyrus whispers in tongues we cannot understand. The walls breathe softly as if remembering. Perhaps this library was never built in stone at all. Perhaps it was always here, in the chambers of the heart, in the hush of memory, in the space between waking and sleep. For the truest archives are not written. They are dreamt, and so the voice softens. The shelves dissolve into shadow. The papyrus curls into silence. The lamps extinguish themselves one by one, until there is nothing but breath, nothing but the hush of the earth. The library fades, yet it lingers. Not gone, not found, but waiting. Waiting in the silence. Waiting in the dream. The library that burned without fire. It begins with dust. Golden dust, rising gently in the breath of a desert wind. The horizon shimmers, blurred by heat, yet beneath it a line of movement unfolds. A road not carved by stone or brick, but by footsteps, hooves, and the endless passage of dreams. It is said that Alexander's march was not merely across soil, not merely through valleys and mountains, but across thresholds of myth itself. Each mile carried him farther not only from home, but from the ordinary world of men. The road that stretched before him was less a path of conquest and more a river of echoes, carrying with it songs, prayers, laments, and visions that long outlived the bodies that first gave them voice. Some whispers tell us that this road was paved not with stone but with memory. And as you walk along it, you begin to hear them, echoes, faint as the toll of a bell heard across water, soft as incense carried by wind. The dust glows in twilight. The sky is vast, painted in tones of fire and fading violet. And there, against this canvas, one can almost see them still. The silhouettes of an army moving like shadows, their outlines dissolving into the horizon. Each step leaves not only a footprint, but a question, a fragment of wonder. Whose road was this? Was it the road of a conqueror, chasing destiny across continents? Or was it the road of a pilgrim, seeking something beyond the world of kings and empires? It is said that when Alexander marched, the earth itself seemed to hold its breath. Cities rose in his path and cities fell. Yet beneath the clang of armor and the cry of battle, another sound lingered, softer, hidden, enduring. The murmur of rivers that had been crossed, the sigh of winds sweeping across plains, the faint songs of people whose names have long been forgotten. Some believe this road was golden not for its wealth, nor for the treasures carried along it, but for the way it caught the light of eternity. Dust rose like incense in the air, shimmering as though touched by the sun's last blessing. And in that glow, everything became both fleeting and eternal at once. Each echo along the way is more than sound. It is a memory. The strike of hooves dissolves into the murmur of rivers. The clatter of shields transforms into the whispers of winds across mountains. The voices of soldiers fade into the vast silence of the night sky. The road becomes less a march of conquest and more a pilgrimage, a journey into the deep unknown, where man and myth, conqueror and wanderer, become one. It is said that Alexander sought more than lands. He sought the edges of the world itself, the point where maps dissolve into ocean, where rivers disappear into mountains, where stars themselves become guides for those who walk too far. Along this road he became both emperor and seeker.
The empire he carried with him was not only built of cities, but of questions, dreams, and echoes. Some scrolls speak of his march eastward, of the dust and the heat, of battles won and lost.
Yet between their lines, if one reads softly, another story glimmers, a story not of armies but of silence, not of territories claimed, but of horizons pursued. For the road of golden echoes was not merely a path of earth, it was a path of spirit. Imagine walking there now. The desert is empty. The sky has darkened into velvet. Stars, sharp and countless, burn with ancient light, and beneath them, the road glows faintly, as though dust itself remembers. Each footprint has long since crumbled, yet the air hums with presence, as though memory lingers in the soil. Perhaps you hear them. A song carried faintly, not in any language you know. The cry of horses, dissolving into the hush of wind. The murmur of water, as though rivers once crossed still flow beside you in dream. These are the golden echoes, each one a fragment of the road, each one a reminder that journeys never truly end. They only fade, becoming part of the silence. It is said that when Alexander reached the farthest edges of his march, he did not find an end, but another horizon. The world has no boundaries, only thresholds, and each one crossed reveals another. The road was eternal. It did not lead to empire. It led to mystery. Whispers tell us that as he stood by unknown rivers, he did not see victory. He saw the stars, constellations marked by the moon, spirals etched against infinity. Perhaps he understood then that the true empire was not measured in lands or crowns, but in the endless road itself, the path that leads onward, always onward, beyond knowing, beyond memory. Beneath the silence of centuries, the road still waits. No longer filled with armies, but filled with echoes. It breathes softly through the desert winds, through the murmuring of distant seas, through the songs of wanderers who walk at night. To walk this road now is to walk in dream. To feel the dust rise golden in moonlight is to remember footsteps no longer visible. To hear the faint cry of hooves is to listen to rivers far away. To see the horizon dissolve is to enter that ancient hush where questions rest, unanswered. Perhaps that was always the secret. That the empire was never about territory. It was about the eternal path, the road that leads us onward, toward the unknown, toward silence, toward the stars. And so the voice softens. The dust settles. The golden light dims. The road stretches still, beyond the edge of sight, dissolving into horizon. Its echoes are soft now, barely audible, as though whispered from a distance too great to cross. Yet they remain, waiting, calling not to be conquered, but to be listened to. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps the road of golden echoes is not outside us, but within us, a path of memory, a journey of dream, leading always into the hush of the unknown. And so, beneath the stars, the road fades. Not gone, not ended. Simply waiting in silence, the road of golden echoes. It begins with silence, a silence so vast that even the wind seems hesitant, pausing as if it too must bow before the immensity of the desert. The horizon lies empty, endless, a pale curve of sand that blurs into the night sky. Above, the stars gather in quiet procession, their light ancient and unhurried. Beneath them, at the lip of this ocean of dust, a small camp flickers. The glow of fires is faint, already fading into ash, their smoke trailing upward like forgotten prayers. It is said that here, at this threshold where earth ends and the desert begins, Alexander stood alone. Behind him men slept, their armor stacked beside them, their dreams weighed with weariness. But he did not sleep. He lingered where the dunes stretched endlessly eastward, a shadow among shadows, listening to a silence that seemed older than time itself. Some whisper that in this place he uttered words not meant for mortal ears. That he made a vow not to his generals or his companions, not even to the gods of Greece or the lands he had crossed, but to something greater, a presence hidden in the vastness, veiled in the stillness, waiting beyond the horizon. The desert has always been more than landscape. To those who cross its threshold, it becomes a mirror, a chamber of echoes. Each grain of sand carries the memory of wind, of footsteps long dissolved, of voices that once rose and were swallowed again by silence. To enter it is to surrender to the infinite, and it is said that Alexander, before he entered, paused to listen. The hush of wind against the dunes carried with it an invitation, soft as breath, immeasurable as the sky. Perhaps he felt it then, that to march forward was not only to cross territory, but to step into mystery itself. There are those who believe he spoke aloud, a vow shaped in the stillness, each word sinking into the sand as though inscribed upon it. Others believe the oath was silent, a vow of the heart, spoken not in language but in presence, in the way he stood beneath the stars, unflinching, listening, waiting. Some fragments of old chronicles speak of this night in veiled phrases. One scroll, half faded, hints that he bound himself to what was unseen. Another, written centuries later, claims that his destiny was not forged in battlefields, but in a vow sworn beneath the desert stars. Yet the truth remains hidden, blurred between memory and myth. Was this oath a prayer, offered to gods both known and unknown? Was it a bargain with the desert itself, an agreement whispered into the endless silence? Or was it only an illusion born from exhaustion, a trick of wind and shadow mistaken for something greater. Picture the scene. The fires have dwindled. Only embers remain, glowing like fragments of fallen stars. The camp is quiet, men breathing in unison, their dreams tangled with longing for home, for victory, for peace. Beyond them, alone in the hush, Alexander lifts his gaze to the constellations. The desert waits before him, vast, veiled, eternal. It is not a battlefield. It is not a city to be claimed. It is something other, something sacred. And so he stands, listening. Perhaps he closes his eyes. Perhaps he speaks. Perhaps he says nothing at all, allowing the silence itself to become the oath. For silence can bind more deeply than words. It is said the dunes shifted as he stood there, as though the desert itself acknowledged him. The stars seemed brighter, nearer, burning like watchful eyes. And in that moment something passed between him and the vastness, not conquest, not command, but recognition. Some traditions whisper that this vow carried him beyond the mortal span of kings, that even in death his name refused to fade, his presence still moving in echoes along the edges of history. Others suggest the vow was not to live forever, but to walk where no man had walked, to cross thresholds unseen, to pursue a destiny not of power, but of silence. In forgotten corners of old writings, there are hints of strange encounters in the desert that followed. Stories of visions beneath starlight, of guides who appeared and vanished, of voices heard not with the ear but with the heart. Perhaps these were born from the vow, shadows answering shadow, echoes drawn to an oath whispered into infinity. And yet, for all these tales, nothing certain remains. The desert keeps its secrets well. Its sands cover footsteps, its winds erase all sound. What was spoken that night, if anything, dissolves into the silence from which it came. But the power of a vow is not only in words. It lies in the moment of pause, in the stillness of recognition. A vow changes the one who makes it, even if it is never spoken aloud. Perhaps that is why the legends linger. Not because the oath was written or recorded, but because silence itself remembers. Beneath the dunes, beneath the shifting sands, beneath centuries of forgetting, the vow hums faintly still, like a note struck in eternity, resonating beyond hearing. As dawn approaches, the sky lightens at the edge of the world. The stars pale, fading one by one. The first breath of light touches the dunes, turning them into waves of silver and gold. The fires of the camp are ash now, cold, yet the silence remains, deeper now, softer, as though it has accepted what was offered. Alexander returns to his men. He says nothing of the night. The oath, if it was sworn, is his alone. The desert keeps it, the stars keep it, the silence keeps it, and so the march continues, footsteps pressed into sand already preparing to erase them. The vow lingers like a shadow, unseen, yet present, guiding, echoing. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps the true oath is not in history's pages, but in the silence between them. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. The desert waits still, endless, veiled, eternal. The vow waits with it, hidden in the hush of wind, in the breath of stars, in the memory of sand. And so the story fades, not ending, but dissolving, like the whisper of an oath at the edge of forgetting. The silent oath at the edge of the desert. It begins with shadow. Not the fleeting shade of evening, nor the simple absence of light, but something deeper, older, more sacred. A darkness that does not conceal but reveals. A darkness that breathes like a hidden river, flowing between the stones of forgotten mountains. And within this darkness, legends whisper of a city not raised by hands of men, nor shaped by the toil of daylight, but carved from night itself. It is said that Alexander once came upon this place, or perhaps only dreamt it. Some believe he stood at its threshold, torchlight in hand, as shadows curled around him like a living veil. Others claim the city never stood in stone, but lived only in vision, a constellation drawn upon the canvas of his restless mind. Whichever tale one follows, the mystery remains. A city without walls of earth, without towers of marble, yet built with such presence that its silence lingers even now. Picture it, a torch sputtering in the wind. Flames flicker across surfaces that shift as if alive, No stone shines back, no marble gleams. Instead, the light reveals shifting patterns, walls shaped from layered shadow, pillars rising not in weight but in absence. The city seems to bend around its visitor, its forms dissolving and reforming with each movement of the torch. It is not the city of daylight builders. It is not the city of masons or engineers. This is the city of silence raised from shadow, its foundations the breath of night itself. Some say its gates were not carved of cedar or bronze, but opened in veils of darkness, a threshold where light itself bowed and gave way. To step within was to step into a chamber of moonlight and hush, where the very air trembled with prayers never spoken. Whispers tell us that this city was aligned not to the sun, as temples of men so often are, but to the moon. Its avenues curved to meet lunar arcs. Its plazas opened into sky wells where stars could be glimpsed, framed like sacred texts. And its temples, vast, veiled, echoing, were said to breathe with the rhythm of the heavens. Imagine standing within one such temple. The walls are not walls. They are veils of darkness, layered, shifting, endless. A ceiling opens not above but within, a chamber of shadow where no flame dares linger. Yet the moonlight enters, soft, pale, silver, spilling in through unseen apertures, aligning with altars carved of silence itself. Each beam seems measured, deliberate, as though the city were a calendar of eternity, counting not days or seasons, but breaths of the cosmos. In this place one does not speak. Words dissolve before they are formed. Instead, one listens, to the silence itself, to the deep hum that lies beneath existence, to the prayers that echo without ever having been uttered. Did Alexander see this place? Some chronicles hint that he traveled into mountain passes where no map guided him, that he spoke of a city that appeared only at night, dissolving with the dawn. Perhaps he wandered its plazas, torch in hand, marveling not at what could be conquered, but at what could never belong to him. Perhaps he sensed that this was not a city of power, but a city of surrender, a city that reminded even kings that their empires are but shadows, fading with the turning of the moon. Others argue that the city never existed at all, that it was a vision carried in his nights, born from exhaustion, from longing, from the weight of destiny. But even if it was only a dream, is not a dream also a city? A city of the mind, of silence, of memory? Some fragments of older myths speak of places like this, sanctuaries hidden in mountain hollows, where light does not rule. Ancient travelers told of chambers that glowed only by starlight, shrines that opened not at sunrise but at moonrise, cities where silence itself was the only law. Perhaps Alexander encountered one such place, or perhaps his restless vision conjured it anew. Yet the legends all agree on one thing: the city was not meant to remain. It was not meant to be settled, nor ruled, nor written upon maps. It was a city carved from night, which means it belonged only to night. To enter it was to glimpse something eternal, something fragile, something that dissolves the moment it is grasped. Imagine now the hush of its plazas, stones, or perhaps only shadows, stretch out beneath your feet. Columns rise like silent guardians, yet dissolve if you approach too closely. The air is cool, tinged with the scent of unseen water, as though a hidden spring breathes within the mountain. Above, the moon hovers full and unblinking, casting silver paths across every surface. You walk, and each step feels like an intrusion, yet also like a prayer. The city does not resist you, but it does not welcome you either. It simply exists, veiled, sacred, silent. Perhaps Alexander stood here too. Perhaps he placed his hand upon a wall of shadow, felt it shiver beneath his touch, and realized that some cities cannot be conquered because they are not made of matter, but of mystery. Whispers tell us that when dawn approached, the city dissolved. Torchlight dimmed, shadows thinned, and with the first breath of sunlight, the walls melted back into the mountains, the temples became valleys, the plazas became silence. Nothing remained. Alexander searched, they say, but found nothing. Only stone, only mountain, only silence. Yet he carried the memory with him, as one carries the echo of a dream upon waking. A city glimpsed, never held. A city that belonged not to empires, but to eternity. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was never meant to remain. Some places exist only as reminders, that silence is also architecture, that night too is a builder, that dreams are as enduring as stone, and so the city carved from night dissolves once more. Back into the mountains, back into the stars, back into the silence from which it came. It lingers only in the faint impression left upon the heart. The feeling that somewhere, beyond maps, beyond memory, there are cities not built to be ruled, but to be remembered in silence. The city carved from night. It begins in silver, moonlight trembling upon water, a current soft and slow, stretching farther than the eye can follow. There are no waves here, no foam, no shore where certainty begins. Only a river, ancient, unhurried, endless. Some call it a path, some call it a mystery. Others believe it is a mirror, holding not the world above, but something deeper, something that breathes beneath the veil of time itself. It is said that Alexander once followed this river, not in conquest, not in hunger for gold or kingdoms, but in quiet awe, compelled by something greater than maps, greater than desire. He is remembered as a man of relentless forward motion, yet here, upon this river, he slowed. Torchlight glimmered on the rippling surface. His men spoke in hushed tones, as though the water itself might overhear. For this was no ordinary current. This was a river that refused to end. Picture its beginning. In the hush of forgotten valleys, beneath peaks that crumble into the sky, the river rises as if from nowhere. Its waters are clear at first, reflecting stars as though the heavens themselves had fallen into its bed. The moon trembles upon its skin, broken into shards of silver, scattered, gathered, and scattered again. The sound is not a rush but a murmur, a low and unending hymn, like breath passing through the lips of earth. Shrines lean toward it, half sunk, their stones softened by centuries. They bow not to kings or conquests, but to the current. Their carvings whisper in languages that no one remembers, prayers carried away by water, absorbed into silence. It is said the river keeps those prayers, that every syllable ever spoken upon its banks is still flowing somewhere within it, carried endlessly downstream. Whispers tell us that to follow this river is to drift between memory and eternity. For each bend reveals not new land, but a new silence, as though the earth itself has forgotten the shape of endings. Alexander followed. Was it dream, or was it journey? No scroll tells us with certainty, yet the stories linger, of soldiers carrying their torches in a line, their reflections trembling beside them like phantoms, as the current pulled them deeper into mist. Some claimed the river flowed toward an unseen sea. Others whispered it was not a river at all, but a boundary, a veil between worlds, a path only the restless might discover. He moved not as a conqueror, but as a pilgrim, walking beside the water, sometimes watching, sometimes lost in thought. The men grew uneasy. The river offered no end, no harbor, no mouth where one might rest. Only bend upon bend, silence upon silence. Yet Alexander pressed forward, listening not to the voices of his men, but to something softer. The hushed music that rose from the current, the song of waters that seemed to echo the rhythm of his own destiny. It is said the river reflected not only the moon, but his own image, shifting, wavering, dissolving. He looked upon himself as if upon a stranger, a king both present and fading, a man both known and forgotten. Perhaps in that reflection, he glimpsed the truth that no empire can endure, that even greatness dissolves, carried away like a leaf upon the water. The river, some believed, was eternal. Others believed it was alive. Some called it the breath of the world, a pulse that never ceased. Still others whispered it was the shape of destiny itself, winding, ceaseless, leading not to an end, but to the soft dissolution of all things. As the river wound deeper, its banks grew stranger. Trees leaned in, their roots sinking into the water as if to drink eternity itself. Stones, smoothed by uncounted centuries, gleamed faintly in the moonlight, etched with spirals that no chisel had made. Sometimes, when the men grew still, they claimed to hear voices, not of their companions, but of those who had walked before, their words rippling in languages forgotten, murmurs carried by the current. At times the mist thickened, rising from the water like veils. Figures seemed to form within it, kings crowned in silence, wanderers whose faces could not be seen, women carrying lamps that flickered without flame. Were they visions? Reflections? Or simply the shapes of mist? None could say. The men turned their eyes away, but Alexander looked. Always he looked. Somewhere beyond maps, beyond memory, the river curved toward infinity. Did it vanish into a sea, hidden beyond mortal sight? Did it sink into the earth, flowing forever beneath stone? Or did it never end at all, stretching endlessly, a line without conclusion? Whispers tell us that one night beneath a trembling moon, Alexander asked this question aloud. What river carries us so gently that we forget our own weight? No answer came. Only the murmur of the current, endless, patient, soft. The chronicles are silent after this. They do not tell us whether he found its end. They do not tell us whether the river dissolved, or whether it carried him farther than history itself could follow. Some believe he turned back, his men weary, their faith in him wavering. Others say he was still searching when dawn broke, the mist curling around him, his figure dissolving with the river's own breath. And some, the quietest voices, tell a different tale, that he never returned, that he stepped fully into the current, surrendering his crown, his burden, his name, letting the water carry him where maps could not go. Perhaps that is why the river is not marked in ink, why no stone recalls its course. For some journeys are not meant for recording. Some paths are not meant for return. Perhaps the river never truly existed. Perhaps it was only a vision carried in the minds of men who longed for a story without end. Perhaps it was not water at all, but the shape of destiny itself, winding, luminous, eternal. Yet even now, if you close your eyes, you may hear it. The low murmur, the silver hymn. A river that does not rush but carries. A current that does not end but continues, softly, patiently, eternally. And so, the story fades. The water grows quieter. The shrines lean deeper. The moonlight shivers and dissolves into mist. The torches dim, one by one, until there is nothing but silver silence and the endless breath of water. Perhaps the river still flows, somewhere beyond the edges of our maps. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it exists only to remind us that some journeys do not end, they only deepen. That some waters do not close, they only carry. And in this way, the river carries us too. Softly, gently, further into silence. Until the night becomes dream, and the dream becomes rest, the river that refused to end. It begins in stillness, stone breathing in silence, moonlight brushing its edges like pale fire, and beyond it, a sky without boundary. At the farthest reaches of Alexander's empire, so the whispers tell, there stood a gate, not a gate for armies nor a passage for caravans. It did not open upon cities, nor upon roads. This was a threshold shaped for the heavens, a stone arch carved with symbols whose meanings are long forgotten, standing not in defiance of time, but as if in quiet conversation with eternity. It is said the gate does not face the world at all. It faces the stars. Imagine it now. A wilderness stretched in silence, the breath of night cool upon the dunes, the faint stir of wind brushing over earth that has forgotten its own name. And then suddenly, rising from the dust, stone. Not wall, not fortress, not ruin of some forgotten town, but a solitary arch. Its stones weathered, veiled with the dust of centuries. Its presence both solemn and tender, as though it had been placed not by human hands, but by a hand greater still. Moonlight gathers upon its surface, revealing faint carvings, spirals, lines that turn inward like rivers of thought, constellations etched in patterns we no longer read. Some see maps, some see prayers, some see the trace of voices lost, inscribed upon the body of stone, and beneath that arch there is no land, no road, only the immensity of sky. It is as though the builders intended no earthly passage, but rather an opening into the infinite, an invitation to the stars. Whispers tell us that pilgrims once stood before this gate. They came not as conquerors, not as merchants, but as seekers. Their steps softened as they approached, as though unwilling to disturb the silence that gathered there. They stood within its shadow, gazing upward, not at stone, but at the uncountable lights beyond it. And in that gaze, something stirred. The gate became more than stone. It became a mirror of longing, a reminder that even in flesh we are drawn to the vast, to the veiled, to the eternal. Some believed that passing beneath the arch meant more than stepping through stone. It meant entering into conversation with the heavens, not a crossing of distance but of silence, a surrender to the immensity that waits above and within. It is said Alexander came here too, he who had marched through deserts, crossed mountains, and carried empires within his shadow. Yet before this gate he is remembered not as conqueror, but as man. He stood in the hush of night, torchlight flickering against stone, his men murmuring behind him. And for a moment the voices stilled. Even the sound of wind quieted, as if the earth itself waited for what he might do. Did he pass through? Did he stand upon the threshold, step forward, and vanish into silence? Or did he remain still, struck dumb by the immensity of stars framed within the arch? History does not say. The chronicles fall silent here, as if words themselves refuse to follow. Only the rumor lingers that he came upon the gate, and the night held him. Some believe the gate was never meant for passage, that it was not a door, but an alignment, a way of framing the eternal, of giving shape to wonder. By day the arch is but weathered stone, but by night, when the stars ignite, the threshold glows with another presence, the infinite breathing through the finite. Others whisper of something more, that the gate was a marker left by those before him, a reminder that empires, no matter how vast, are but dust beside the sweep of the heavens. That beyond conquest, beyond maps, there is always the silence of stars. And in that silence, we are all the same. Wanderers, dreamers, shadows passing beneath eternal light. Imagine yourself standing there now. The night deepens. The earth falls away. The air is cool, tinged with the scent of dust, the faint echo of wind. Before you, the arch rises. Its stones glow pale, as if lit from within, and through it there is no road, no land, only sky. A sky so vast it trembles in your chest. Stars gather like rivers of fire, flowing endlessly. Constellations emerge, not as diagrams, but as voices. Each light a whisper, each glimmer an echo. You do not need to understand. You only need to stand, beneath the silence, beneath the gaze of the infinite. Some voices say that when you step through, you do not vanish. You do not ascend. You simply change. Your thoughts loosen. Your name dissolves. Your body becomes weightless. You carry nothing forward but the breath of stars. Others say you remain exactly where you are. And yet everything shifts, as though the boundary between yourself and the heavens has dissolved. It may be that the gate does not open upon elsewhere, but upon within. That it is not a portal to another realm, but a mirror to the depths we rarely see. The place in us that is already infinite, already marked by the moon, already breathing with the same rhythm as the constellations above. The chronicles do not record what Alexander felt. They do not tell us whether he knelt, whether he whispered, whether he placed his hand upon stone and listened for an answer. Perhaps the silence was enough. Perhaps the silence was the answer. For in the end, empires fade, names crumble, dust returns to dust. But the gate remains standing still, facing not the world but the stars. And so we return. You stand once more before it. The arch rises. The night stretches. The stars, infinite and patient, gaze back. There is no need for words, no need for understanding. Only the soft awareness that you are standing where countless others once stood. Wanderers, seekers, kings, dreamers, each of them pausing before the infinite hush. Perhaps Alexander stepped through. Perhaps he did not. Perhaps the gate was never meant to be crossed at all. Perhaps it was meant only to remind us that we too are thresholds, that within us there is an opening, a silence, a way of gazing into eternity. The arch does not answer. It only stands. It only faces. It only waits. And as you gaze with it, your thoughts begin to dissolve. The night deepens. The stars breathe. And silence carries you gently, softly, into rest. The stone gate that faced the stars. In forgotten chambers where the dust lies deep and the air is still, there is said to rest a mask. Not of beaten gold, nor of jeweled splendor, but of stone darkened by time, shadowed in silence. A face carved not for the living gaze, but for the eternal hush that waits beyond. Its eyes closed, its lips sealed, as if the breath that once filled it has drifted into another realm. It is said the mask was found not far from the graves of kings, where corridors fold in on themselves, and torchlight reveals more questions than answers. There, within a chamber too quiet to belong to the world of men, it lay, watchful, though blind. Silent, though speaking in the language of centuries. Some claim it was placed there after Alexander's death, meant to preserve the likeness of a conqueror whose shadow stretched across the world. Others whisper that it is older still, carved long before him, waiting in darkness until the day it might be mistaken as his. And so the story begins, with a face that is not a face, a silence that lingers long after the voice is gone. Imagine it, a tomb corridor veiled in dust, the flame of a single lamp flickering, casting light that trembles upon stone. Shadows dance across walls where ancient carvings have softened, worn down into silence by the slow hand of centuries. And then, half hidden, almost overlooked, a shape emerges. A mask, resting as if in sleep. Its eyes are closed, carved with a stillness so complete that it seems less sculpture and more dream. The lips curve faintly, not in smile, not in sorrow, but in a neutrality too deep to name. A face at rest, untouched by time's decay. It does not glitter. It does not shine. Its power is not in splendor, but in absence. It is not what it reveals, but what it refuses to show. Whispers tell us the mask was placed upon the face of Alexander himself, a final covering for the one who had walked further than any king before him. But if so, why stone? Why shadow and not gold? For in his age, kings were clothed in light, their likenesses molded in radiant metal, meant to dazzle long after their voices were silenced. And yet this mask hides. Cloaked in darkness, plain in its material, solemn in its design. Was it meant to conceal rather than preserve? To remind those who gazed upon it that the emperor was also dust, that the eternal outlives the man? Or perhaps it was not his mask at all. Perhaps it belonged to someone older, someone unknown, a ruler whose name is lost, whose story was swallowed long before Alexander was born. The mask, then, may not have been tribute, but inheritance, a relic passed through centuries, carrying with it not identity, but the echo of kingship itself. It is said the mask does not represent a man. It represents silence, silence deeper than tombs, silence greater than conquest, the silence that lingers when all voices have fallen, when even memory begins to fade. To look upon it is to feel something shift, the realization that power, no matter how vast, is temporary, and that what endures is not the king, but the stillness that receives him. Some who claim to have seen it say that standing before the mask feels like standing before time itself. The eyes closed as if in endless meditation, the mouth sealed as though it carries secrets not meant for the waking world. Others whisper it is a doorway, an emblem of passage. A reminder that beneath crowns, beneath empires, beneath names carved in stone, there is always this same face, closed, silent, eternal. Perhaps Alexander looked upon it before his end. Perhaps in the hush of some chamber, lit by a dying flame, he stood before the mask and recognized himself in it, not the warrior, not the emperor, but the silent face that waits for every man. Some voices tell that when he died, his companions feared the world would unravel without him, that kingdoms would splinter and memory itself would fade, and so they placed the mask, not upon him, but beside him, as if to bind his restless spirit, to remind him that even he could not outlive silence. But others say it was not placed by men at all, that the mask was always there, a shadow of eternity, a watcher in the tombs, waiting for him as it waits for us all. Close your eyes now, and imagine yourself standing there. The corridor stretches, the flame in your hand trembling against stone. The air is still, dense with the scent of dust. Before you lies the mask, resting as though it has been waiting for you. You lean closer, the lips do not part, the eyes do not open. And yet you feel it looking back, not with vision, but with presence. It does not tell you who it belongs to, It does not reveal whether it held the face of Alexander or of another. Instead, it holds your gaze within its silence, and you realize the mask is not a relic. It is a mirror, not of features but of destiny, of that quiet moment when all journeys pause and the eternal inhales. It is said that the longer one gazes at the mask, the more it seems to change. Some see in it the youthful lines of a boy king, restless and dreaming. Others see the heavy brow of a man worn by battles. Others still claim the face dissolves entirely, leaving only shadow, only absence. Perhaps this is its truth, that it wears not one face but all. That eternity itself dons a mask so that we may look upon it without turning away. History does not tell us where the mask rests now. Some say it lies buried still, lost beneath collapsed stone and the weight of centuries. Others believe it was taken, hidden in secret vaults where scholars whisper its presence but never reveal it. And a few, always a few, insist it was never an object at all, but a vision, a dream seen only in the deepest hours of night, when the veil between waking and eternity is thinnest. And so the mask remains, veiled in secrecy, its silence echoing through the ages. Not proof, not artifact, but symbol. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was never meant to be worn. Perhaps it was meant only to remind us that kingship outlives kings, that silence outlives words, that the face of eternity is always veiled. And so, in the half-light of imagination, we leave it where it belongs, resting among shadows, lips sealed, eyes closed. A silent guardian of all that cannot be spoken. The flame fades. The chamber dissolves. The mask remains. And as you drift into the hush between waking and sleep, you carry the quiet thought that perhaps eternity itself wears a face, one carved not of flesh, nor of gold, but of silence, a face we cannot truly know. In the hush of twilight, where the wind drifts soft across forgotten plains, there lingers a silence once broken by the crackle of campfires. Long ago, beneath the rising stars, voices murmured in many tongues, banners swayed, and the air trembled with the promise of conquest. Yet now the fires are gone, the voices faded, and only the memory of smoke clings faintly to the air. It is said that here, where men once dreamed of empire, only the sky remains unchanged. The same stars that crowned the brow of the conqueror still watch from above, their light falling upon a world that remembers, even when men do not, Alexander's empire, vast as the horizon, stretching from ocean to desert, from temple to mountain, has dissolved into dust. Its maps have crumbled, its cities fallen to ruin, its crowns tarnished and scattered. Yet some say that the dream itself remains, wandering like a spirit that cannot be bound by time. For though every empire falls, there are visions that refuse to fade. Imagine the scene. The conqueror sleeps at last. His armies disbanded, his throne empty, his name etched in stone but eroded by centuries. Around him silence. Yet in that silence, a breath lingers. A dream that outlives the body, that outlives the empire itself. It is not carved into monuments, nor sealed within scrolls. It moves more lightly than dust, more quietly than ash. It drifts, unseen, in the spaces between memory and myth. The dream was simple, though born from a restless fire, that the world might stand not as many, but as one. That the borders dividing men might dissolve, that the sea and the desert, the mountain and the plain, might be joined beneath a single horizon. A vast unity, shimmering like a mirage, too great for any one man to hold. Whispers tell us that Alexander himself did not invent the dream. He only carried it as a vessel carries flame. Before him, others dreamed of unity, the sages, the poets, the nameless wanderers who gazed into the stars and longed for harmony. And after him too others would rise, each reaching for the same horizon, each imagining a world bound not by division, but by shared breath. But in Alexander, the dream became a blaze, fierce and consuming. His armies moved as though propelled not by footsteps, but by vision. His voice, it is said, could bend men not merely with command, but with promise. For he spoke of horizons yet unseen, of a future that glittered just beyond reach. And though his empire did not endure, the dream slipped from his hands into the air, where it has floated ever since. In forgotten corners of the earth, when silence falls deep and the wind stills, some claim to hear it. Not as words, but as an echo, soft, like a sigh across the ages. Perhaps it comes when a traveler stands at the meeting of two rivers, watching their waters merge. Perhaps it stirs when voices of different tongues rise together in song. Perhaps it is felt most keenly when strangers share bread beneath the same moon. In such moments, the dream stirs again, as though Alexander's fire were never extinguished, only scattered, embers waiting to glow in the hearts of those who listen. Yet the dream is also elusive. Like smoke, it curls away when grasped too tightly. Like horizon, it retreats when pursued. For unity cannot be conquered by sword or decree. It belongs not to empires of stone, but to the invisible realm of memory and longing. Some believe that is why the empire fell, that the vision was too vast for walls, too fluid for maps, too sacred for crowns. It could not be held, because it was never meant to be possessed. It was not an empire of the earth, but of the spirit. Imagine the camp once more. The conqueror lies asleep, his armor set aside, his sword resting silent at his side. Around him, the embers of the fires fade, each flame winking out one by one. And yet, though the light dies, the warmth lingers, so too with the dream. The empire fell, the stones crumbled. The maps were rewritten, but the warmth, the vision, remains, soft and unbound, like a breath lingering in the night. It is said that dreams live longer than empires. An empire is weight, stone, crown, army, command. A dream is breath, light, ungraspable, endless. And so, when the empire dissolved into dust, the dream did not follow it. It rose instead, invisible, flowing from the conqueror's lips into the silence, carried like smoke into the night sky. Some whisper that Alexander's truest conquest was not of land, but of imagination, that he revealed the horizon itself could be pursued, that the world could be thought of as one. And though he could not hold it, he showed that it could be dreamed, where memory fades. The dream continues. It has no capital, no throne, no monument. It moves through centuries as a shadow, as a sigh, as a subtle stirring in the hearts of men. Sometimes it lies dormant, forgotten beneath layers of division and silence. Sometimes it awakens suddenly, rising like dawn. It has worn many names, many guises. It has been called unity, brotherhood, peace, empire, federation. But always it is the same, the dream of a world without borders, of humanity gathered beneath one endless horizon. And though it slips from grasp, though it retreats beyond reach, still it lingers, an echo, an ember, a vision waiting in the dark. Perhaps Alexander's empire was never meant to last. Perhaps it was always destined to dissolve, so that what endured was not the stone, but the dream. For stone crumbles. Maps fade, names are forgotten, but dreams are light. They drift, they change, they whisper, but they do not die. And so the conqueror sleeps. His empire dust, his voice silent, yet above him the stars still shine, the same stars he once followed into the unknown. And beneath them, the dream breathes still, soft as a sigh, eternal as the night. Close your eyes and listen. In the quiet beyond words, in the hush between waking and sleep, perhaps you will hear it too. The dream that outlived the conqueror, the vision that belongs not to him alone, but to us all. For perhaps his empire was never lost. Perhaps it was never of this earth at all. Perhaps it was always of the eternal night, where dreams do not fade. In forgotten folds of the earth, where the dust of centuries drifts heavy upon stone, there are whispers of a chamber, a place not marked on any map, not remembered in any scroll, yet spoken of in hushed tones, like a secret shared only between shadows. It is said that this chamber was touched once by the journey of Alexander, not written in his chronicles, not etched into the tablets of his companions, but murmured later, like a rumor too fragile for the light. A place where time itself slowed, where silence thickened like incense in a temple, where the ordinary pulse of life ceased to matter. Some claimed that to enter it was to step outside the measure of the world. The story often begins with torchlight. Imagine it, a narrow passage, walls cool with damp stone leading down into the earth. The flame wavers, bending as if drawn by a breath not of this world. At last the path opens. The chamber reveals itself vast and solemn, as though it had been carved not by human hand, but by silence itself. On its walls are etchings, constellations unknown to any stargazer. Spirals, arcs, and shapes that seem both familiar and utterly strange. They glow faintly when touched by flame, as though they are not carvings at all, but echoes of something celestial pressed into stone. And in the center of the chamber, stillness. Not the stillness of emptiness, nor the hush of sleep, but something deeper, a silence that feels alive, thick as smoke, pressing against the skin, entering the breath. Those who entered spoke of it as though they had walked into the pause between two heartbeats, into the breath the universe takes before it exhales creation again. It is said that time bent here, hours stretched into centuries, minutes folded upon themselves like parchment, endlessly unwritten. Men who stepped inside returned unable to say how long they had been gone. Some swore they had lingered for days, though only moments had passed beyond the threshold. Others felt they had been there only an instant, though their beards had grown long and their eyes seemed older than their years. Perhaps it was sanctuary, a place where time ceased its relentless march, where the conqueror and his companions might rest in eternity's embrace. Or perhaps it was prison, an eternal dusk from which no one could truly escape unchanged. Whispers tell us that Alexander himself stood in the chamber, his torch held high, gazing upon the strange constellations. Did he see in them the maps of worlds yet unconquered? Did he sense the pull of infinity, more vast than any empire of earth? None can say. The chamber becomes, in the telling, less a place than a state of being. For time is not only measured by sun and shadow, by water clocks and stars. Time also lives within us, the beat of blood, the rhythm of breath, the slow arc of memory. To stand in stillness is to unweave these threads, to step into a place where there is no before and no after. It is said that those who lingered long enough within the chamber felt their thoughts dissolve into vastness. The self grew light, like dust carried upward on a breath of wind. Some returned unable to recall their names, as though the chamber had unstitched the fabric of identity, leaving only silence where memory once lived. And yet, many who spoke of it did not speak with fear. They spoke with reverence, for in that silence they felt they had touched something eternal, a pause between worlds, a stillness deeper than death. There are many ways to imagine such a chamber. Perhaps it lies beneath a forgotten temple, where columns rise like petrified trees and ceilings curve like the heavens. Perhaps it hides within a mountain, carved into rock that has never seen the sun. Perhaps it does not exist at all, except within the dream of humanity, a symbol for the stillness we seek in moments of weariness.